Okay, so this Prezi is over the different types of conflict, and conflict is a struggle that a character goes through. You need to be taking Cornell notes over this Prezi, so the title, what do you think it should be? Conflict seems like a great title for me. So conflict is your title, then you divide up your notes into two sections. The left-hand side, you will notice, will be all the different titles. I'm okay if you don't write person versus on every single one. Just make sure you have it on the first one so you know. And then on the right-hand side, you will be writing down the definitions and examples if you need to. So please make sure you're following the Cornell format. To know if it should be written down, it is in white. So if it's in white, please write it down. So the different types of conflict. So what is conflict? Like I just stated, it's the struggle between two forces. Why did I say forces and not people? Well, depending on the story, your main character may not be a person. So that's why I kept it as forces. It is also known as a problem a protagonist must overcome. Who is your protagonist? Okay, it tends to be the main character in your story. They tend to be someone who is good. Okay, the antagonist is the person against your protagonist. Anti. Okay, so your protagonist has to overcome some sort of problem. And why would an author use conflict? It helps to propel your story forward. It keeps your story interesting. So we need to break down conflict. In this class, we're going to focus on 5 types of conflict. So, on the left-hand side, please make sure you write person versus self. Then the definitions you will put on the right. So, person versus self. This is your internal struggle. All the problems happen inside. There are dilemmas, there are debates with yourself. If you don't know what internal is, please make sure you write down inside. I don't want you using words you do not know. So when you go back to study, you need to know what you're talking about. How can you tell if your character is going through an internal conflict? You can tell through the thoughts. So are they having a lot of debates with themselves? If they are, then your character is undergoing an internal conflict or a person versus self. Okay, I have examples from movies because I feel like that's a safer direction to go as opposed to different novels. So, here are some person versus self conflicts. The Dark Knight. Batman has a person versus self dilemma. He is deciding what he should do, if it is right to keep going the direction he is going. In The Dark Knight, you also have Harvey Dent, and he has a person versus self conflict as well. Frozen. Queen Elsa has a person versus self. She has this power that causes fear in her kingdom. So she is trying to overcome that struggle. All these are happening within themselves. Okay? Moving on. This tends to be the most popular conflict. When I say conflict, this is what you tend to think. So on the left, you should have person versus person. Again, if you don't want to write person versus, since you just did it, I'm okay with it. So you need to know person versus person is a struggle between people. So when you are dealing with person versus person, you need to make sure you can name everyone involved in that conflict. Okay? How can you tell if your character is undergoing a person versus person conflict? Look at their conversations. Are they having altercations with different characters in the book? If so, it's probably a person versus person conflict. So, why would I say you can name everyone who's involved? Sometimes you get stories where your character is fighting against more than one person. My example is Mean Girls. You have Lindsay Lohan's character Katie, who is with the plastics. And the plastics are 3 girls, and you can name all 3 girls. Because you can name them, that's person versus person. And there's one in particular that she's fighting against, which is Regina George. Diary of a Wimpy Kid, again, person versus person. He is fighting against different characters in the book, especially his brother and the school bully. This one tends to get a little abstract, and this is where I tend to lose some students. Person versus society. This is when your protagonist struggles against societal factors. Some examples would be rules, such as laws, discrimination, societal structures. How do you know if it's person versus society and not person versus person? Well, person versus society is going to include many people. If you can't name everyone involved, that's probably person versus society. So, for example, if you do not like a certain law, okay, you don't know everyone involved in making that law. So that's person versus society. When you have discrimination, okay, that is person versus society. You can't name everyone involved. So how can you tell? Through the actions and interactions between characters. Is it one specific person they're fighting against, or is it a structure, a government, a set of rules? If it's rules and not necessarily a person, then that's going to be person versus society. Here are some examples. If you were here in 6th grade, you read The Giver. Excellent book, excellent example of person versus society. Hunger Games. Hopefully you read the book. Most of you probably saw the movie. So Katniss is not against one person, it's against the entire structure. So these are examples of person versus society. Person versus nature. This tends to be an easy one. It's when the protagonist struggles with the natural element. There's two different types. They can struggle against weather, or they can struggle against an animal. How can you tell? Look at who they are fighting against. If they are fighting against an animal, that's probably going to be person versus nature. If they're fighting because of the elements, the natural elements, it's going to be person versus nature. So, my two examples, Jaws. Jaws is the people fighting against a great white shark, so that's person versus nature. A new movie that has just been released, Into the Storm. Have not seen it, but I can tell you it's person versus nature because that's the title and every trailer. Okay, so a natural element again. Our final is person versus technology. This is when the protagonist struggles with something technological, such as a machine. You see this mostly in sci-fi novels, and sci-fi movies. We will not read a lot of person versus technology, but when you do your independent research or your own reading, this might be your favorite genre, so this might be what you gravitate towards. So a couple different examples. The classic Terminator, person versus machine, so this is person versus technology. Transformers, the movie with Shia LaBeouf, they made it a person versus technology because the focus is on Shia LaBeouf's character helping the machines. So that's why it's person versus technology. Okay. As you are reviewing through your notes, please make sure you know what conflict is. You should know there are 5 types of conflicts. So person versus self, person, society, nature, technology. You should also have the definitions for each. If you didn't know some of them, maybe you put an example. If you are still confused, you need further clarification, please talk to me in class. That's the only way I can help you is if you talk to me. So I'm available during class, after school, during HAP, before school. Come see me. I will help you out. So please make sure you have your notes done. I will be checking them in class.